Hello. All right, I'm gonna apologize in advance because I'm probably gonna get a little aggressive in this video, but we'll see. We'll see. Um, so to start it off, basically, I've never done like a video like this, but I felt like I can't not. I mean, not. It doesn't really matter, but I can't not say something about this video because it just is it was just crazy to me. All right, it was. It made me. It enraged me to my core to watch this video, and you can let me know if I'm overreacting, but I don't think that I am, and so we'll go through and we'll see how. We'll see what you think, I guess, of this video as we watch it. But Hank Green recently made a video that he called a masterclass in manipulation, and I can't help but think of that video and think about how he did that, and I'm like, I feel like I need to do the same thing and dissect this and just vent my frustration about this video because it's just crazy to me. And I gotta talk about it. I went through the video and I wrote down. I have over 4 pages worth of call outs in the video. I put timestamps, but we're just gonna watch it through and I'm gonna pause as we go. And I have so much stuff here, and I got a little snarky. Like this actually made me mad. To watch this video. It doesn't make any sense, in my opinion. The only thing I can think with this video is like, how much did they pay you? And I'm not saying that they definitely got money for making this video, but I feel like if you didn't get money, it's worse. Because it just feels so off. Anyway, so there's this channel called Astrum Earth. And they have over 350,000 subscribers. And I initially found this channel because I was watching a lot of space content, and I found Astrum, and I was like, oh, this is pretty good stuff. Seems like a pretty credible source. Seems pretty reliable with the content, right? And so I found out that there was a secondary channel called Astrum Earth. I was like, you know what? I watch Astrum. Might as well follow the Astrum Earth. And I haven't watched as many of the videos on Astrum Earth as I have for Astrum. But of the few videos that I've seen, it seemed pretty good. Seems like, something worth watching, right? Like back down here, right, we have this thing, climate change, we've lost, right? And I thought that was a pretty good take. Because I agree. I think that I think we lost that war. However, we have this one right here, this video, the Wood Wide Web. It says we were wrong, and it's titled as "The Biggest Scandal in Science." And that title to me is crazy. And I know maybe it's just clickbait. Right? Maybe it's clickbait, but it's just crazy because from the very beginning, you're already priming our expectations, right? You're telling us we were wrong. You're telling us that this is not true, right? You're telling us that it was an absolute hoax and a scandal, right? This was just an absolute, terrible thing, right? We've got to be really careful, right? We can't let this kind of thing happen again. Right? And so you're like, oh, what happened, right? Going into this video, right? And so, I thought that this was like a credible source, but now I'm not, I unsubscribed. I'm not so sure. I have no interest in watching like anything that they make. Because this one video just made me that mad. But we're going to go into it, and we're going to go through it, and then you can let me know if I'm overreacting or...
Over the past 25 years, scientists have presented us with a captivating, almost Disney-esque tale.
Not even, so we're not even like 10 seconds into the video. And that right there is again priming you. It is priming you for what to expect in this video. This captivating, almost Disney-esque tale, right? Making it seem like it's a fairy tale. It's not true. It could never be true. It's all make-believe. Like, the world could never work this way, right? It's already priming you to believe that that's the truth, right? It's making you feel dumb for believing that it could be the case, right? And it's not always what you say, but it's how you say it. But in this case, it seems innocent, but it is priming you subconsciously to think, oh, well, fairy tales are for children. It's silly. It's make-believe. It's not real, right? So putting that in there, Disney-esque, they're saying it's make-believe. It's fairy tale. And they haven't even told you, like, they haven't even shown you anything yet. And they're already telling you that. They've already told you their opinion on this. Meanwhile, later on, they're going to say they're objective. That's not objective. That's subjective right there. And you're not even 10 seconds into the video and that happens. Something I realized I took a note of. We're gonna go back because I just wanted to highlight this because I saw this and I thought it was crazy. Going to the channel, they have a description here. And it says, Astrum Earth promises to transform how you see the world beneath your feet and the skies above, because to truly understand the cosmos, we must first understand home. And having that in your description and then making this video is just crazy to me. And you can let me know if I'm wrong about that. And if that's totally fine. No worries. But we're going to go back to the video now.
Over the past 25 years, scientists have presented us with a captivating, almost Disney-esque tale. Imagine a diverse and vibrant forest, filled with trees of different ages and species, all thriving in the sunlight that powers their cellular functions. But hidden beneath the surface, intertwined within their roots, are thin, hair-like strands of a different kingdom altogether. These branching structures serve not only to expand the reach of each individual tree, but they connect multiple trees together, allowing messages to be communicated in a buzzing, multi-service system akin to the invention that changed the course of human civilization.
So, I didn't even put a note for this, but I kind of want to highlight this because I feel like this is put in here. Like, disclaimer, I have not read any of these papers. But I would argue that I don't need to highlight the angling and the perspective and the manipulation that is going on in this video. Because it is not an objective opinion. And, obviously mine is not either. So just to clarify. But this right here, talking about they even beat us to the internet. It starts to make you doubt, like, what? It's not the internet. It's not the internet. It's completely different. Being able to communicate, we had telegraphs, right? Did we call that the internet? No. We could communicate long distances with a telegraph, but we didn't call that the internet. Completely different. What the internet is not what's happening here. And for them to make that comparison, it seems like, wow, but that's the whole thing, right? They're blowing it out of proportion, making it seem less believable so that you are then feeling like, well, there's no way that that's true. There's no way that they literally have the internet, and they don't. And I don't know if anyone makes that claim, but if they do, then they probably don't say it's literally the internet. They say it's kind of like the internet. Or an interconnection of, I don't know. It is a network of connections for communication, but that does not mean it is the same thing as the internet. Having a network of connections is the same thing as a bunch of people in a room talking. That's a network of connections. You can talk to someone across the room by playing the game telephone, right? Does your message always go through 100%? No, but I would imagine it's the same thing for these plants. Anyway, tangent over. We're
The
continuing.
internet. Welcome to the Wood Wide Web. I'm James Stewart and you're watching Astrum Earth. Now buckle up, because we're about to recount a scientific tale with more twists, turns and knots than an old oak tree. The discovery of the Wood Wide Web mesmerised the public as much as the internet itself, resulting in the publication of countless popular science articles, books, documentaries, films, podcasts and more.
These are all great things. I think they're going to continue to talk about other things that are beneficial with, like, when this article or this paper was published and the news broke on this as a thing, it changed the way that people started to see trees. They stopped seeing them as just something in a forest and started seeing them as living creatures. Started seeing them as communities, as things in connection. Not everyone. Obviously, most people don't even know what the heck this is, right? But the fact that anyone was seeing trees in a different light, that's impactful. That's important. And I think that right there is the entire point of this video. It is to revert that perspective, that idea that, hey, maybe trees aren't just a resource to be harvested. Maybe it's not just about saving the trees to save the planet. It's about save the trees for the trees. And I feel like if everyone has the perspective that trees are, living creatures that communicate and, are alive and, have relations with other plants, people would be less inclined to just keep on chopping, right? And so, that's not good for business if people don't want to keep chopping down trees, right? And so people that, potentially, right? I'm not saying this is what's happening here, but if your business ran off of wood products, it would be in your best interest to put as much propaganda slop out there to confuse your audience, to confuse the masses, so that no one knows what to believe. And if no one knows what to believe, then they just choose to believe nothing and ignore it. So you don't need to prove it wrong. You just need to put doubt. You just need to put out some doubt. And if there's enough doubt out there, then you win. You don't have to actually prove you're right. You just have to make the other people struggle to prove themselves right? And you don't have to do that much heavy lifting. All you have to do is put some random bits of question in there. This is how conspiracies thrive. Continuing on.
But is there more to the story? A growing number of scientists certainly seem to think so. And
that right there, a growing number of scientists certainly seem to think so. Honestly, I don't know. I like I said, I'm not going to look into the actual debate on this and see how many scientists are on one side of the fence compared to the other. But they're really going to only cite one paper. They're only going to talk through one paper. They're not going to be like, we have 20 papers proving how. It's one paper. So a growing number of scientists seems misleading to me. It's not a growing number of scientists. If it was a growing number of scientists, then you could have cited, the 20 papers that are trying to disprove this and have evidence that disproves it. They're going to go through the evidence here, and they don't really disprove the most important thing here. That there's actually there's resource sharing connections and things along those lines. Whether or not there's the internet and things along those lines, and there's other things that are proposed that potentially there's like the mother tree, and I'm getting ahead of myself. But all these things are proposed, but not in the initial paper. And they are saying that the Wood Wide Web is disproved, and if whatever your conception of what that was, maybe, but there is still a relational, symbiotic relation, communal relation that is going on in forests. And it's kind of difficult to prove it because in order to find out if there's a connection there, you have to destroy it, basically. You have to dig it up and destroy the connection. So it's really difficult to actually observe this information, and they mention that later. But I just want to say right there, a growing number of scientists, it makes it seem like it's more than it is. Potentially, maybe it actually is extremely heated. I don't know.
Still continues to this day.
Still continues. So this is another thing. This is not something that's like this happened like right now. This has been going on for years, right? So if, in my opinion, if we were truly wrong, if there was proof that we were wrong, right? And this was the biggest scandal, the debate would already, like right here, myth debunked. There would be no debate. The debate's done. Well, how is the debate done? We have proof. We have undeniable proof that it's not true. But they don't have that. They clearly don't have that because there would be no debate. There's no debate. They were wrong. How could you debate hard facts? And what a big part of this paper is going to argue is that it's based off of bias and over positive citing or something along those lines. They're going to talk about it. But if the only evidence to disprove that this is true, if the only thing you can do to prove it wrong is say that their methods are questionable, that leads me to think your methods are questionable. Why can't you just go out and get the evidence? Prove that they're wrong. Prove they're wrong. If it's so wrong, prove they're wrong. But they don't really do that. And that's kind of what also pisses me off about this, because at the end of the day, they're going to show a clip later. They basically prove that to some extent it exists and it's there, right? And the ideas of grandeur in a functioning internet, whatever that actually means in their mind, I don't know, right? But they find proof that there is connections happening and there is resource sharing and there is connections being formed. They found evidence in their study that it seems likely, right? They can prove it in the lab, but they can't prove it in the field. But I want to ask you, I'm getting ahead of myself because if it's happening in the lab, why would it not happen in the field? Can anyone explain to me the logic on that? If the results can be replicated and studied in the lab in a controlled system, what makes you think that in the natural world they don't do this? Why would they not do this? Why would they do this only in a lab? How do they know they're in a lab? I want to ask you that question. How do they know they're in a lab? And they don't. The answer is they don't. And it doesn't matter because they're just doing what they naturally do, which is form these connections. And so if you can prove it in a lab, you've proved it happens in the field. These are plants. These aren't I don't even know. I don't know. Maybe I'm not a smart enough scientist to understand how wrong I am, but the logic doesn't track to me. It just doesn't make any sense. You understand what you're studying, right? You understand that this isn't I don't know. We're going to continue.
In this video, join me as we uncover the whole story behind the
whole story.
Wood Wide Web, where it all began.
Not objective. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. The way they said that, and you're like, this is so silly. So dumb. Imagine believing this. That's what that said.
its impact on conservation, and the wealth of research it inspired into the secret lives of our wooden friends.
Right, and they just explain right there. They know, they're aware that this was beneficial to conservation and things along those lines. But who cares about that crap? You know, like conservation, we don't know. And they're gonna backtrack later and be like, conservation is important, guys. Yeah, no. Not according to you. Apparently, trees can get chopped down for all we care. I mean, yeah, we gotta protect our forests, but keep on chopping.
Our story begins in the temperate forests of British Columbia in Canada. Suzanne Simard is about to make a discovery that will help her to achieve the near impossible with her PhD thesis, making the cover of Nature. In 1997, her article was published with the title Net Transfer of Carbon Between Ectomycorrhizal Tree Species in the Field, which is fairly unassuming considering the content of this paper. In essence, Simard was claiming to have observed...
Claiming to observed. Again, not objective. You're saying that she's wrong. You're saying she's wrong. You're not being objective here. Objective would have been just stating the facts. You've done all of this like, dancing around the topic, doing a whole lot of prep work before you got things going. You've already kind of, shifted any viewer into a certain perspective where this is just wrong, right? That's not objective. That's not how you objectively analyze a debate. You're not debating this. You're not giving us the facts. You are giving us your opinion. This is not an objective video. It's not.
The transfer of carbon between seedlings of paper birch and Douglas fir in the field.
They make this, so this is a part that really makes me mad, because this is where things go from being just about the trees. Like, I'm making this video, initially I was like, don't be coming for my trees, bro. We about to throw hands. But then they start bringing in like hints of like racism and like individualism and, a denial of community and like all these other concepts into this video where I'm like, what is happening right now? What are we watching? What are they saying? Do they know what they're saying? Like, are they listening to themselves? Because they're highlighting the fact that they're two different species of tree. How can you imagine that? Two different species, two different trees working together? They're not even the same species? That's crazy. Like, we've never seen different species have symbiotic relationships before. Like, humans don't cooperate. There's so many examples of animals doing this. Why would plants be doing this be just absolutely absurd? There's just no way they would do that. They're plants.
Through a shared fungal connection between their root systems. Not just any old...
Right, I'm not gonna lie. This is crazy. I'm not saying this is 100% true. However, there's a lot of evidence that this does in fact happen. Whether or not it is as cognizant of the situation, I don't know, right? But it could be, this tree gives to the fungi, and the fungi, is like the bank, right? The fungi is like the bank, and this tree gives to the bank so that later on, when it needs resources, it can collect its interest. Is kind of the vibe that I'm getting from this. That's what's just come to mind while I'm talking about this, right? So they don't necessarily need to be like, oh, I'm gonna help out that guy over there. Meanwhile, that's what happens because the fungi is the bank, right? And you take the money from the person that has it and you loan it out to the person that doesn't, right? And not everyone is going to pay back. It happens, but usually they do. right? So if you think that these fungi are stupid for doing this, then the entire banking system is a bunch of idiots, is what you're saying. Which
fungus can form a connection with trees. This privilege is mostly reserved for mycorrhizal fungi. The term mycorrhizal fungi refers to a broad group of species that have been forming beneficial partnerships with plants for over 450 million years. Their name comes from the Greek myx.
That's a lot of time to figure this stuff out. Just saying.
Meaning fungi, and rhiza.
What works lasts. You know, if a system benefits anyone, they're going to want to keep it, right? And if it benefits one person, right, and then everyone else evolves for it to benefit them as well, eventually you're going to have a system that has evolved for millions, hundreds of millions of years together, right? So that they all are optimized to function efficiently and benefit from this situation. Because that's just what you do, you know? Oh, you know, my life sucks. You know, you could sit there and keep saying my life sucks, or you can try and take actions to make it better. And when you make it better, then, you know, then your life doesn't suck anymore, right? That's literally what evolution is, basically. It's just a different type of evolution. But that's what these plants do. Like, there's plenty of time to figure this stuff out.
Meaning root, which is accurate because these fungi form their relationships with the roots of their plant partners, extending the reach of the plant through a fungal network called the mycelium. These networks are so vast, it's estimated that every 1 kilogram of soil can contain up to 200 kilometers of fungal strands, and some individual fungi can extend across 100 square meters. With this impressive reach, the fungus can help its plant friends to absorb more nutrients from the soil in exchange for some of their sugars. This is an example of symbiosis, because both parties get something good out of the relationship. Now, scientists already knew about this network at the time of Simard's research. All the way back in 1885, the German plant biologist Albert Bernhard Frank wrote a paper describing the symbiosis between plant roots and mycorrhizal.
So here, like I said, there's a good amount of evidence saying that there is this symbiosis here. And this is what I argue is the most important thing about this. And I feel like whether or not it's actually said, by the time you watch this video, you know, like by the end of this video, you start to think that there's this relationship is not there. That trees do not share resources. And they put verbiage in here. There's words that they say in here that start to make you doubt these things, right? They start to make you doubt that this happens. Meanwhile, it's been known for a long time that this happens, right? And we have a lot of evidence to prove that this happens and that these symbiotic relationships exist. Meanwhile, after telling you, here's the proof, it's true, they are going to then make you doubt that it is, right? And I really don't like it. I don't like it.
Fungi in Prussian truffle districts. And throughout the 20th century, scientists had documented the transfer of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus through fungal connections in lab experiments. But what made Simard's discovery so exciting was that she claimed to have seen trees using this network to transfer carbon out in the forest, which was a big deal. In the forest, there are far more variables at play.
You're telling me that they can do it in real life too? This is like putting people in a room and telling them to solve a puzzle, and then they speak, right? And then you go outside and you tell people to solve a puzzle out in the park, and they speak, and you go, They do it in the wild too? There's so many factors. I don't understand. Like they highlight this like this is just the most bizarre finding. Like it's just so crazy that if they do it in the lab and it's proven in the lab that they would do it in the wild. And I feel like that is just the weirdest thing to highlight. So.
Play, some of which are near impossible to replicate in a lab study. Anything that you observe in these natural environments is a far more realistic snapshot of what is really going on, so it's often the final piece of evidence needed to prove a theory. This was no different for the theory of a Wood Wide Web. Scientists knew it existed and had some idea of what it could do, but for
some idea of... No, they had a pretty good idea of what it could do. He literally just explained some of the things it could do.
Many, Simard's research provided definitive evidence that these ideas hold true for real-world habitats.
So that's what her initial paper is. And that is what this entire thing should have been about, right? They should have been providing evidence to disprove that these connections and these symbiotic relationships actually form in the wild. That should have been the only paper utilized to discredit her, to disprove her. You should have been taking that paper alone because that's what the great scandal is, right? This paper that proves her findings, basically, you should have then gone back and then disproved her findings by doing the field research yourself and disproving it, right? That's how you disprove things, by disproving them. Not by saying, well, I don't know if I really trust how they figured that out, so it's wrong. That's not how science works. You don't just say it's wrong without a reason. Their reason is, well, I don't like how you did it. Okay, prove it wrong then. But they can't. So like, what are we even talking about, right? But they're going to make it seem like this is the biggest scandal. This is all, this paper right here, we're not even, like, we're only, where are we? We're like 5 minutes into the video, right? We're just getting really into the paper, really. The actual topic, right? All of that was just, some build up. This is the actual findings. This is what they should have been disproving. They will proceed to move past this and forget that they told you that all of this is true.
Now, as I'm sure you're wondering, how did she do it?
No one was wondering that. No one cared. I'm gonna be right now. No one cared. But by making that question, be like, how could she possibly have proved this thing that's nearly impossible to prove? No. But now you are asking, how did she do that nearly impossible thing?
Well, the study looked at paper birch and the Douglas fir trees because they are known to make the same type of fungal connections. Each seedling was given a dose of carbon dioxide gas, which was labelled with different isotopes of carbon, so the team could track where this carbon ended up. On top of this, the Douglas fir was kept in the shade so that it would make less of its own sugars by photosynthesis. The experiment ran for 2 growing seasons, and the results were astounding. Simard found that the labelled carbon dioxide had been converted into sugars by photosynthesis in the paper birch, then transferred to the...
This process right here, the fact that we can, track, isotopes of carbon is so crazy. I just thought that this is just really cool. This concept is very cool.
The Douglas fir through their fungal link. Some carbon had travelled in the other direction too, but since the Douglas fir was struggling to make sugars in the shade, the paper birch had transferred more carbon to it overall, resulting in a net carbon gain in the Douglas fir. In other words, these trees weren't just going Dutch and splitting their carbon equally. The paper birch was giving extra carbon to the Douglas fir. The team were shocked by this result and naturally started coming up with some ideas as to why the paper birch was being so
Why was the paper birch being so generous? Right? And so saying that, it puts out there that you should not be like, if someone else is struggling, whether or not this is even true, it could be totally false. It's fine. Right? But saying this kind of seeds this concept of don't be generous. Don't, give freely. Right? And they're going to even highlight this even more. And I don't like that message. It is just an awful message. It is how the world burns. And so the fact that this is being pushed so hard in this video that's about seemingly not that is just bizarre to me.
generous. This led them to wonder, could it somehow sense that the Douglas fir wasn't making as much carbon on its own? This theory was outrageous. It seemed to tear apart the widely accepted concept of survival of the...
This concept was outrageous. It seemed to override... No, it seemed to tear apart the widely accepted concept of survival of the fittest. Where's your objectivity? Are you how could you say that? That is just such a wrong statement. It's just such a wrong statement. Helping out someone, being generous, goes against the concept of survival of the fittest? No. Because, the individual creature, right, has its genetic code, right? It's got its advantages and its disadvantages, right? However, that creature is also part of a community. And this community as a whole is also, in a sense, built off of a more complex genetic code. Because it's not just your code, but it's also all of your siblings' code and all of your relatives' code and all these things, right? And you're all working together. So when you look at one tree, right, you go, oh, this tree, it's surviving. It must be very fit. However, you step back and you see that this tree is in a forest and the forest exists. That forest is basically we classify it as an ecosystem. It's an organism. It is a living organism, but we don't see it as such. And it's the same as our human body. Our human body is made up of tiny little cells that are all doing different things, but they're all working together to create the human, right? In the same way, we all work together. All of us humans are little parts of the same community that all work together to, advance society, right? We advance civilization. We build civilizations and we advance. So in a sense, a civilization is a creature of sorts. It is a living organism that evolves and adapts and grows with time, right? And so is a corporation, and the planet as a whole is basically on the same thing. The scales keep increasing. So you can say, yes, survival of the fittest for an individual creature, right? But if you work together with other creatures, it does not tear apart the concept of survival of the fittest, because you are adapting to have a more advantageous survival strategy by adapting to work with the collective rather than the individual, because it is many hands make light work. This is just basic stuff. It's basic stuff. This is not some complex concept that's mind-boggling and tears apart survival of the fittest. No, you're telling me you don't know what that even means. And this just really upsets me because it just keeps going back to keep yourself individual. Don't even try to work with other people. Don't care about the collective. They will never help you, right? You got to help yourself. That's what survival of the fittest is. No, it is actually way more advantageous to work with a collective, hence human civilization, right? What were we before we started working together? You know, I mean, are we working together? Debatable, right? It's debatable. On some level, we're working together. But, you know, without pooling knowledge and documenting things and raising and teaching the next generations and then reaching out and forming connections with other cultures and other tribes that might have different resources, without making these connections, without this formation of a bigger system, humanity does not become what it is. Human civilization does not exist. And so for you to go look at plants and say, there's no way they could do that, that's so dumb, is just so absurd, because that's what we do. And that's kind of what I think is going on here. They're trying to make it seem like plants do not behave the same way as we do. Plants are just a resource. They are not living creatures. They do not have connections. They do not have relationships. They are just resources. And they're not just resources. They are living creatures, and they do have connections. And they are a part of something greater. And at some level, those plants are a part of our ecosystem, right? Because as they'll talk about, it's important to keep the plants alive and protected, because without plants, we're gonna die. That's just the truth of it. Without plants, it's game over. We lose. And so it's important to see the plants as more than just a resource, more than just plants. At some level, we are playing a game, and we all have different roles to play in this game. But if we decide we want to play a different game and we just get rid of them, all of a sudden the game falls apart, because just because you want to play a different game doesn't mean you actually can. You know, you gotta, I don't know. I'm getting lost in my analogy. We're going to continue on. We're only 6 minutes into this video, and I'm already pushing 30 minutes of footage. This is
the fittest. Instead of everyone looking out for themselves, we're talking about two different species helping each other via a shared connection with a third, even more distantly related species.
So again, they're highlighting that these are different species all working together, and they're highlighting how crazy of an idea this is, and that it's just so bizarre that this would happen and that these relations would form. And newsflash, they do this because it's survival of the fittest. It's more advantageous. Working together is better for survival than doing it by yourself. That's why plants do this. They already cracked the code that humans are too stupid to realize. We should be taking notes. Write that down. Write that down. It's important. Like, this is important stuff. You know, we think we're so smart. We're being really dumb. And this video proves it.
Though they are different, these tree species are competing for the same resources: light, space, water, and nutrients. So why don't they just keep everything for themselves?
Yeah, why would
Could
they
it
do
be
that?
that they share because their generosity will eventually be returned by another member of the forest? Simard's fine.
They ask that question, right, because they have to, because it's obvious. But they make it seem like it's kind of like a weird thing. Like, the way that they say it, it seems doubtful. Like, would they really do that? Right? And they're going to highlight how doubtful that is in a little bit.
Findings suggested that trees formed far closer-knit communities than we once thought, and that resources were shared to boost the overall health of the forest.
How crazy of a concept! I just went through why that makes sense. So
Aided by some seriously helpful fungi, of course. Printed on the cover page of Nature, with the catchy slogan Wood Wide Web. This discovery caused quite the stir, and the idea that trees had beaten us to the punch with their own internet with wood...
Highlighting that again, total abstraction of the information. This is just put in here to make you doubt that they could be on this level, which of course they're not actually using an internet. Like, trees are not sending YouTube streams. Most like, I mean, I don't think so, right? Trees are not sending YouTube streams across these fungal connections or whatever. Like, that's not what's happening. So by putting this out here, you are just making it seem less plausible.
Origin servers and fungal routers really caught on. There were articles on the hidden language of trees, manuals on deciphering tree feelings, documentaries, TED Talks, and bizarrely, even a name drop for Simard in the hit show Ted Lasso.
So they're highlighting all of these bizarre things like tree feelings. Like, trees don't have feelings. No, I assure you that they have some kind of feelings. They can tell when they are being harmed, and they can tell when they're injured. Because if they couldn't, then they wouldn't, release resins and stuff to help heal that area. So, like, on some level, the tree is aware it's injured. 100%. And so that's feelings. That's feelings, right? If you decided you're going to beat up your pet, maybe your pet isn't going to, hold a grudge forever. I don't know. I mean, most likely they wouldn't like you anymore, which again, like shows intelligence of animals. It's pretty obvious that animals are more than just these furry things that walk around. Like, there's more going on here, guys. We're not playing. It's like, this is more than just a video game where everything that's around you is just generated. Like, these are living. Like, everything is living. It's all alive. I don't know. That's a tangent, irrelevant to the topic.
So, if you look at the use of the phrase Wood Wide Web in publications between 1997 and 2022, you can see an exponential increase in popularity from the early 2000s. The Wood Wide Web had even spun its silk over Hollywood, with Amy Adams set to star as Simard in the feature film adaptation of her research career. The world, it seemed, had gone tree crazy. But Simard took things one step further, publishing a book titled...
So now they start talking about her later work, right? Which is more... what's the right word? It's more abstract than the previous paper, right? This is something that is taking it a leap further, and this is what they argue more about. But this abstraction here is not relevant. Disproving the whole mother tree theory does not disprove the Wood Wide Web that we were initially talking about, but they're going to act like it does.
Titled Finding the Mother Tree in 2021. The book is essentially a memoir, telling the story of Simard's professional and personal life against the backdrop of the Canadian forest. Besides her 1997 research, Simard discusses her discovery that fungal networks can allow for warning signals to be communicated between trees, kin recognized, and preferential treatment applied to closer relatives. She even suggests that the fungal network in forests works like a human brain, with the fungal strands as neurons and chemical signals as...
They make it sound more complicated than it is. It's just a network for communication. It's not making conscious thought like a human brain, right? And this is just another level of hyperbole, I feel like. And whether or not she actually poses it as this, I don't know, right? But you don't need to have, like, by putting that idea of a brain there, a human brain, it makes it seem way more crazy and unbelievable, rather than it just being a connection of nodes basically that pass resources from one to the other, right? If you have excess resources, then you pass it to one that has less, right? And that just continues on. This is it's such a basic concept, right? I get a lot of resources. I pass it to my buddy, right? Now we have an equal amount of resources. His buddy doesn't have the same amount of resources as him. He passes some to his buddy. Oh, well, now we're not equal again. I'll pass some of my resources to my buddy. All right. Well, now I have, he gets some resources from his buddy as well. Oh, well, now we're not equal. He passes some back, right? Like, you don't need to know what's going on 5 kilometers away. They're going to make it sound like that's the case. You don't need to know what's happening 5 kilometers away to make a connection. All you need to know is what's happening in your immediate area. That's it. And it's the same thing with the trees. They don't need to know how many trees are around them that they need to communicate with to communicate a warning, right? If you are, say, on a field, right? You're out on a field playing a game of, baseball, soccer, football, whatever you're doing, right? You don't need to actually know who's around to say, heads up, when a ball's in the air, right? You don't need to know who is listening to send out a warning and for them to receive it. But you do know that it is in your best interest to warn them, because the more people around you that you warn, the more people are there to warn you. So there is this symbiotic relationship here. It seems like, why would you waste your time warning other people? Well, they're like little outposts. They're little mini scout towers all around you, right? So if you warn them, they can warn you in the future. And you have this, you have these people around you, or these, these other trees that grow around you, and you go, hey, watch out, right? You don't know who you're saying it to necessarily, but by doing that, now all the trees around you get, prepare, right? And then they survive because they prepared. And then later on, they can yell, hey, watch out. And now, one, they're kind of like a protective barrier against whatever's coming your way. And two, they help you prepare for it. It just makes sense to do this. And it's not that complicated. It's really not.
Neurotransmitters. This concept transforms the forest into an ecosystem where no tree stands alone, and familial bond.
Because standing alone is not a good idea. It is very easy to die when you're by yourself. When you have numbers, everything, well, no, I won't say everything, but a lot of things get a lot easier, right? When you're on the run or something, right, and you're hiding in a forest, you've got no one to keep watch for you while you sleep. You've got no one to help you fight a monster or an animal, if we keep it in the real world. There's no other people that can help you fight an animal that's stronger than you, right? There's no second pair of eyes that's keeping an eye out for you, right? It just makes sense to help them out for no other reason than to help you. That's literally that's how most systems work. You're literally saying this goes against survival of the fittest, but it is highlighting survival of the fittest. It is proving that this strategy is effective and it works.
Bonds can get you through hard times. With a picture like that, who wouldn't have the urge to run to the nearest forest and hug a mother tree?
Making a joke and making it sound ridiculous and silly.
It certainly was a beautiful idea.
Certainly was. Again, not objective. They just said that it's wrong and it's not true, right?
That organisms from totally different kingdoms, plantae and fungi, could come together in symbiosis to promote communication across the entire forest. It had the potential.
Across the entire forest. Yeah, again, like I said, this does not mean that every connection has to span the entire distance. You just need to focus on the immediate area around you, but they're going to make it sound like every connection spans the entire distance, which is just ridiculous and inefficient.
Potential to revolutionize the way we thought about conservation going forward. More emphasis.
It had the potential to revolutionize conservation, but it's a good thing that we shut that down so that it didn't get the chance.
Could be placed on maintaining mother trees in the forest. But perhaps even more revolutionary was the idea that trees were more like us than we thought.
This is the thing that I want to highlight here. That right there. They are more like us than we thought. What do you mean? No. We can't have that. We can't have that. Get rid of this. Get this out of here. We need people to not believe this. We can't let them believe this because that's not profitable.
They too could speak, could provide for their kids, give preferential treatment to their friends, and maintain a social life. Amidst these global shifts,
maintain a social life is put in there. That's another abstraction to make it seem like it's more than it is. That is not a requirement. That is not a requirement. That's just added on there to make it seem more absurd.
Shifts in perspective. It seems like the golden opportunity to seek similarities between us and the plants. In fact, these scientists were giving us the green light to do so.
Literally highlighting all of the reasons why. I don't know why, like, so many little girls. What's going on here? Another reason why I totally distracted myself with that because I just noticed it. I'm like, why is it like that?
The world
they literally just explain why it was beneficial, why it was good, and the good potential it had. And they're basically just showing their hand as to like, okay, so why are you so hell-bent on disproving this, right? And they're going to say, we can't just pick the good and the bad stories, but that's exactly what they're doing because the disproving of this does not disprove the actual, does not disprove it. It does not disprove it. The results are inconclusive at best. Which, you know, for someone saying they're trying to be objective and just, you know, not pick and choose what does and doesn't get published, seems very hypocritical to me.
Had certainly fallen in love with the Wood Wide Web, but like a tree being felled, it was all about to come crashing down.
Showing this and saying that not objective.
Justine Cost, Jason Huxima, and Melanie Jones. These scientists shared something vital in...
Apparently, so they mention these people because apparently they worked with her in the past, so that gives them some credibility. But it's saying, to me, like, these are just random scientists that have some credibility, and I don't want to make any, you know...
in common. They had all worked with Suzanne Simard at some point in their careers.
At some point in their career, not necessarily on that, but at some point.
Paper that
random
started our
scientists.
story off. Despite sharing Simard's belief in the Wood Wide Web for years, these three tree experts...
Despite believing it for many years, they randomly decided, you know what, maybe we should double check that. You know, I'm not trying to point fingers or anything like that. However, I just want to know what spurred that thought. I really, because something green, perhaps something green. You know, not saying that's what happened. Not saying that at all, but just potentially. You know, something was very influential in that change of mind.
had begun to get an uneasy feeling about where it was all heading, both in academic circles and the wider media.
Uneasy feeling about where it was all heading. Where was it heading? Towards, as they just highlighted, better conservation, right? What, they were worried that people were going to love trees too much? Why would they be afraid of that? Oh, because then we can't harvest them like they're just resources. Oh, makes sense. Okay.
So they did what any good scientist would do and ask the...
They did what any good scientist would do. Again, just seeding doubt there, right? And be like, this is what any good scientist would do. You believe this? Oh, you must be a bad scientist then. You didn't think to question this? You must be a bad scientist then. You want to believe the good scientists. Don't believe the bad scientists, right? Don't believe the people that, actually did the research, right? Do what the good scientist, any good scientist would do, right? Because all the other ones are trash. These are the only good ones.
Difficult questions, forcing themselves to look objectively.
Look objectively. This is why I kept highlighting how it's not objective, because they're going to highlight how they need to stay objective, and they're going to make this a big point. Mission failed. Mission failed.
If that meant casting doubt on their own research. In a later interview, Cast explained that they didn't initially set out to debunk any of Simard's claims about...
We were never trying to debunk the claims. I guarantee you that was the main intention.
The Wood Wide Web.
Yeah, as a scientist, we can't pick and choose what are the good stories and the bad stories. That's sort of not our job.
We can't pick and choose. That's sort of not our job. What is your job then? Right? No one asked you to pick and choose, but you decided to go back and put doubt on this. But you didn't actually disprove it. It's not disproved. It's not disproved. So what are you doing then, right? If you're not picking and choosing what this good and bad stories are, then what are you doing by debating this, by casting doubt without actual evidence that it is wrong? Like, half your evidence is that their methods were questionable. And I'm not going to say that questionable methods are not a reason to be concerned. However, if you don't have good evidence to disprove the claims made, then what are you doing? What are you doing? You're picking and choosing what is a good and bad story.
Rereading the literature had forced them to face an uncomfortable truth about the fungal networks they had once put so much faith in. Unnerved by what they...
So I tried to go and read this article, but it's behind a paywall and I didn't want to pay. Positive citation bias of overinterpreted results lead to misinformation on common mycorrhizal networks in forest. That has actually nothing to do with disproving mycorrhizal networks. So the initial premise of this video is that that's wrong. That the mycorrhizal fungi networks in forests are not actually there. That's what this is supposed to be disproving. This video is telling us that that's wrong. That paper, this paper is the main evidence against it. And it's actually not even arguing that. It's not even telling us that that's not true. So what is happening right now? What is happening right now? Because now you're giving us the perfect proof that the fungal connections aren't there. Meanwhile, it's just talking about misinformation in the common... It's literally saying common mycorrhizal networks in forests. It's literally saying that they're there. It's not denying that they exist. It's just saying that there's misinformation about them. So this paper actually is not telling us that they're wrong. That the Wood Wide Web doesn't exist. It's just saying that there's misinformation about it. This is, I didn't even realize this, but that's actually, crazy. because the entire framing of this objective video has been framing how wrong it is. And this is their evidence, and it's not even... They're literally doing... they're literally spreading misinformation by using a citation bias. This video is literally doing the thing that they say, watch out for this, we gotta be careful not to do this, and they're literally doing it. Crazy.
The authors voiced their concerns in an article published in 2023, to great acclaim by the rest of the science community.
We are concerned, however, that recent claims in the popular media about CMNs in forests are disconnected from evidence. Recent claims, not all claims, not saying that the Wood Wide Web doesn't exist. No! Literally in their abstract, they're not arguing that they exist. They're not arguing that. The Wood Wide Web exists. I feel like that's an exaggerated term, but these mycorrhizal connections, whatever, exist, and they're not saying that they don't. They're not saying that they don't exist, and we found evidence to disprove them. They are saying that they are concerned about recent claims regarding these connections. They're saying it's disconnected from evidence. That is not disproving the Wood Wide Web. But we're going to now use this as our perfect slam dunk on the Wood Wide Web.
This article garnered almost as much attention as the 1997 study that had inspired it, and brought the dream of the Wood Wide Web as we knew it to an abrupt end.
The Wood Wide Web to an abrupt end. No, that's not what that paper was talking about at all.
But what did the authors take so much issue with? In their paper, Cast and her colleagues reviewed all research surrounding what they call common mycelial networks, which is just a more technical term for Wood Wide Web, where mycorrhizal fungi connect the roots of the same or different plant species underground. We'll call it the network from now on to make things simpler. They identified 3 common claims that had been made about these networks, and sought to review each claim in turn to see if the evidence agreed. The first one, namely that the networks are widespread in forests, was fairly simple to explore. Many mycorrhizal fungi can and do form associations with lots of different host species.
So immediately just prove that the Wood Wide Web does exist. Just pointing that out there. They technically just said it. It was actually very easy to figure out that no, it is there.
Which would suggest that networks are common in forests.
But they put suggest because it's still up for debate.
However, there is a problem, because we can't really observe these networks in situ, that is, in the forest itself.
How could we know if they're actually there? How could we know that they're actually doing this? I mean, we could do it in a lab, but how could we know for sure if it's happening in the woods? The stupidest argument.
As you would damage and fragment it before you could tell whether it was one continuous connection or not.
One continuous connection is not required.
Each fungal strand is only about the width of a human hair, after all. There has been research mapping the presence of mycorrhizal fungi using techniques like machine learning, but to actually know whether these fungi link together in one big continuous network across a forest, well, scientists would need to analyse the DNA of the fungi and the plant roots they attach to everywhere in the woods. Well, at least it is
making it sound like it is just the most absurd and difficult thing to do, and there's just no way we could prove that there are mycorrhizal fungi connections. There's just no way that we could prove this network happens in the wild. We do not need to prove that it is widespread across the entire forest. If it is happening locally anywhere in the forest, you have proven that it exists on some scale. And if it exists in a small area, there's a good chance it exists in the rest of the forest. And it's a good chance that they're connected. This is just, like, I know that I'm not providing evidence, but this is just common sense. they're making it seem like this is just the most absurd thing.
As many different locations as possible to see if they match up. It's a long, expensive, and slow process.
Making it seem like it's so hard to do this. It's not. I really don't think it's that difficult to do this, but they just need to make it seem like it's really hard to prove this because they don't have evidence to disprove it, and they're just explaining why they don't have the evidence to disprove it. It's because it's so difficult to disprove. If you can't disprove it, then shut up. Like, what?
And had only been done by 5 studies for 2 tree species at the time the authors were writing.
So they didn't do any of their own research. To me, if you were really trying to disprove this and you were really concerned and you really wanted to get the facts, you would have tried to figure this out yourself. You wouldn't have just read papers. You would have done the research. But it doesn't sound like they did that.
The point is that even though these networks do form, we can't be sure that the links are continuous enough through time and space to make them a viable...
Continuous enough through time and space? They're making it seem like this is, like, again, like they're highlighting how crazy and how difficult this is and how absurd it could be. It's really not that complicated. It's really not. The links are continuous enough through time and space to make them... They don't need to be permanent connections. Not every neuron in your brain is there for eternity. That's not how it works. Like, honestly, I don't know how a brain works. But I'm pretty sure that every neuron that you had as a baby is not the same neuron that you have now. Meanwhile, you have grown and evolved and advanced in your capabilities regardless. So explain to me why... If my brain, which is so complicated and so complex and can do all of these things, doesn't necessarily need to be continuous through time and space, that these mycorrhizal fungi network connections need to do the same. Like, why are we holding them to this standard? Because they need to cast doubt. They need to make it seem unlikely, right? I don't need to be in your presence 100% of the time in order to help you out. If you need help, you ask me to come over and I'll help you. It's that simple, right? I imagine that there's probably some system in place because, again, it's survival of the fittest and they have had millions, hundreds of millions of years to get this sorted, that there's some kind of mechanism in place to form new connections or expand on connections when required.
Reliable tool for communication. For all we know, the links might only last a few days, or could be too...
Links lasting only a few days does not disprove this. Just period.
Fragile to connect trees from opposite...
And then they're going to say this: too fragile to connect trees from across the forest. The fragility of the connections is of no importance, and it's not one continuous fungal line that's running all the way over there. These are not telephone lines, right? These are more like I don't know, like radio antennas or something, right? The signal can ping off of them, right? Rather than running a single cable line, you can just set up towers and ping. I imagine that that's what they're doing here. Why? Because it's more resource efficient. And then where you need the cable lines, like if you just think about what we do, they're probably doing that on some level. Why? Because they've had hundreds of millions of years to figure this out. If we found something that works, we can probably relate that concept back. And as I said, the fact that I'm saying that is what they're trying to keep you from doing. They're trying to keep you from thinking that these plants and fungi can problem solve and figure this stuff out better than we can. right? Because they're not worth saving. They're not worth, seeing as living creatures. Only humans are smart enough to figure things like this out. No. No.
Ends of the forest. The second claim was that seedlings can use the network to share resources, like the carbon we saw earlier, in order to help them grow, and not just within the same species.
And not just really exaggerates that. Like, it's the most absurd thing to help out other species. It's how am I supposed to take that other than, like, racist? Racist. I don't know what's, like, sexist. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just like, what are you trying to say with that statement? What are you trying to say with that statement? I don't understand. Right? Why is it so bizarre for two trees to help each other out? What's so weird about that? They're both trees. They're both in the forest. What's the difference? What's the actual difference between these trees? Functionally speaking, they're doing the same thing. They're living in the same place. Why is it so bizarre that they would help each other out? Why is it so bizarre that they would work together? It doesn't make sense.
Now, this one hit especially close to home for the authors, because they had all worked with Suzanne Simard on this, and her 1997 study was the first to properly test it out in the field. But what Cast and her colleagues started to question years later was that this behaviour doesn't seem to lie within the fungi's self-interest at all.
So this is what sparks that concern? It's not really in the best interest of the fungi to help. What are you talking about? They literally said that by helping, they get sugars. They give extra nutrients and they get sugars. Where is the lack of benefit here, right? They're going to explain what they think the lack of benefit is. But why,
Think about it. If you were a fungus connecting the roots of two tree species, why would you only ever funnel resources between the two trees rather than...
Why would you only ever funnel resources between the two trees? I guarantee you they don't only ever funnel resources between the two trees by using some of those resources themselves. I guarantee you. But they're making it seem like it's just bizarre. Think about it. If you were a fungi, right, why would you only ever funnel resources between the two trees and not take any for yourself? Right? The finder's fee. You gotta take that finder's fee. Don't help out your friends. Screw them. It's all about you. Right? That's what they're saying here, right? It's like, think about it. If you're a human and you've got two friends, why would you only ever help them out with stuff and not ask them for help yourself, right? Like, what? Like, and no, you would also, like, you have friends. Like, do you have family? Do you have friends? Do you have anything? Do you have a team that you're working with on this project? Like, what is happening? What do you hear the words coming out of your mouth? Do you understand what you're saying? You're saying that this is just such a bizarre idea. Why would they only ever help? It's so stupid. They're making it sound like it's just the dumbest thing to help out anything. Everything else be damned, my survival is the most important. And you can still think your survival is the most important, but also realize that it's better to help out more people because more people can then help you.
And taking some for yourself. And how is the fungus supposed to know?
How's the fungi supposed to know? It doesn't need to know, right? It gets sugars from one tree and it goes, oh, thanks for the sugars. As I said, it's probably like a bank system. This one needs sugars. Okay, well, I'll dish out some sugars to you. There you go. You get your sugars, right? I would be curious if they could do, like, I don't know if they did this in the initial study, but they should have, if they didn't, they should have, like, they found the carbons, they traced the carbons from one plant to the other, but they should have also tried to collect some of the fungal sample that made the connection to see if there was also traces of both within it still, right? Because they're making it sound like it goes from one tree straight over to the other one. No, I guarantee you that it's being utilized by the fungi. It's not using all of it, right? Because it's more beneficial to keep other trees alive around you, because if you hold, this is why it's beneficial for the fungi, right? Because if you are a fungi that has evolved to get your resources, to form symbiotic relationships with trees and form form these connections where you're trading resources for sugars with trees, it is not in your best interest to hoard all of the sugars. Because if you hoard all of the sugars, you will survive, but then your tree buddy dies. And now you're screwed, right? It's much better to also hedge your bets and help out that tree, and help out that tree, and help out that tree. And by helping out all these trees, maybe your best pal over here passes away, but you still got all these ones that you hedged your bets against, and you were helping and you were nurturing so that they could grow stronger and help you continue to survive. So the best interest of them to pass along the nutrients is by helping them get nutrients. It adds a level of insurance. It adds a level of security. So it doesn't need to be this absolutely, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Selfless act. It can be very self-serving and still be generosity. It can still be survival of the fittest while also helping other creatures survive. Because clearly it works. Clearly it works.
Difference between carbon it can use for itself and carbon to be sent for Paper Birch's friend, the Douglas fir.
Them making this argument is just spreading doubt. It's not disproving anything, it's just putting questions out there. Just what if? Just what if? There's no evidence they don't have evidence disproving it, they're just unsure, right? They just don't know. Like, how does the fungi need to know? I just explained why the fungi doesn't actually need to know this. This whole argument is crap. It's a crap argument meant to spread doubt and not actually disprove it.
The authors reviewed 26 studies.
Wow, 26 studies. They don't explain what these studies were. They don't explain what these studies were about. They just reviewed 26 studies related to the topic, right? It makes it sound like they really did their homework, like they did, like it's very credible. They looked at 26 studies
that claim to prove resource transfer through the network, and found that for all of them, the results could be explained without...
They say that the thing is with numbers, it's very funny, because it's not what you say, it's how you say it. They could have looked at 50 papers, but only used 26 of them, so that it's all, that's the power of writing. They could have looked at 50 papers. Did they? I don't know. Maybe they did look at 26 papers. But the way that they word, like the way this is said and the way this is worded, they make it seem like it's just the most absurd thing, right? And like they have all this evidence against it, right? And that all these people are doing it wrong. But for all we know, they're also picking sources and removing certain pieces of evidence that doesn't go with their argument. And the reason why I'm highlighting this is because they don't actually provide any of their own evidence. They're only using other papers. So how are you disproving something without actually disproving it? You're not. This entire paper is not objective, and it's not, we have to not pick and choose. You're picking and choosing. This whole, it's all BS. It's all BS. What does it say here? In summary, resources can be transferred below ground between trees, but CMNs do not necessarily mediate the flow. So they're basically saying, we proved, we have evidence, we have proof that at the very least trees are sharing resources. Oh, okay. So then you're wrong. And we're like, oh, but it may not be the fungi. Okay, that doesn't matter. Are the plants sharing resources? Yes. Okay. Well then, then they have a relationship, then they have a network of some kind that they're transferring resources and sharing resources. And you're not disproving anything at this point. Now you're just lost in the sauce. You don't even know what your argument is. You're just spreading doubt. They may not necessarily mediate the flow. Meanwhile, we have evidence that they do. They do mediate the flow of resources. And they're saying it could be through the soil. Did they just pass it through the soil? What do you mean they just pass it through the soil? How do they just pass it through the soil? Show me that happening. Show me the evidence of that happening. Show me the process of how that happens. How does a tree go, hey, go along and toss a sugar molecule through the soil to another tree? How does that happen? That's what I want to see that happen. Show me that happening. No, they can't, because they didn't do it, because they're just talking out their butt.
Involving the network at all. For many, the resources could just as easily have been transferred through the soil with no need for fungal connections, and that includes the 1997 study. Similarly, the authors note that no...
Can you explain? Explain? No, they won't explain. Because what? Because what? They're not going to go into more detail on that. They really should. That's the most important thing. But they won't, because I don't even know what that means. And neither do they. Neither do they.
The study has actually provided proof that this transferred carbon, if it exists,
If it exists. Ugh. Casting doubt again. Super objective here. Good job.
benefits the performance of the tree receiving it. How?
This right here is the worst argument. This right here is the worst argument in the entire video. A lot of terrible takes in this video, but this right here is the worst one. Right? So they're about to say they're not even sure if the extra sugars being provided, they're referring to it as carbons, the extra carbons. Notice they're saying carbons, not sugars, because if you said, oh, extra sugars, you would be like, well, obviously extra sugars help. So they're not saying that. Notice the words. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. The manipulation here is insane. What are these extra carbons gonna do? They don't do anything. It's not carbons, it's sugars. The carbons are being passed along in sugars. They talk about it in the beginning of the video, how they're passing sugars along to the other side. What do you mean? How could extra sugars be helpful? You know, if you're hungry, you know, like, how could extra food help? Like, how could it? How could it? This argument is so terrible.
How could it? If you were a tree with a system to generate food and find resources on your own, why would you depend on help from an unrelated neighbor tree? One that could easily die, become disconnected, or simply stop cooperating?
Do you know what humans are? Do you know what human civilization is? Do you know what you are? Do you know what you're saying? Do you know what you're doing? Are you okay? Are you real? Like, that's actually a genuine question. Are you real? Because, like, think about what you just said. How could it? Right? How could, think about it. If you are a creature that can generate your own resources and generate your own food and find your own resources, right? Why would you ever bother getting help from someone else? And how would that ever help you? Like, are you alive? Have you gone out and done anything? Did you build your house? Did you make your car? Did you farm your food? Did you do any of that? Did you make your clothes? No? Then what the hell are you talking about? Because you literally do this every day with everything that you freaking do. This is literally human behavior. It's very effective. It's very good for survival. I can assure you we are doing a good job of surviving. Maybe a little bit too good of a job of surviving in some cases. This argument doesn't make any sense. Like if you think about this argument, they're making this seem like so bizarre. Like if you think about this argument for more than 2 seconds, it's just like a what? Because they're like, what if they get sick or die or just stop cooperating? People do that all the time. However, it is better to take the risk. I mean, again, we go back to banks. It is better to take the risk on a person and, get the potential reward from that risk than to never take the risk. Because if you never take the risk, you can never grow your resources. Whereas if you do take the risk, you could potentially have an increased inflow of resources in the future. So it is much more in your favor to help out everyone else just a little bit so that in the future they can help you out just a little bit. And the more that you help out just a little bit, the more a little bit of help you're getting from everyone around you, right? So instead of you having to generate all of your sugars for yourself all the time, you can get sugars from other trees. And so maybe you're not getting as much sun currently, right? Maybe you're getting shaded for a certain part of the day, but you can get sugars from your buddies and they will help you to survive, because if you survive, later on in the day, you're getting the full sun and then maybe they're not. So now you can send sugars their way. And it just makes sense. It's just logical. And like they put this here, it doesn't seem like a very good strategy evolution-wise. Stupid. It's just so stupid. Again, humans. You don't need to go far to find an example of us doing this. The fact that we do this, I think, is pretty good evidence that it works for evolution. Evolutionarily speaking, it is quite advantageous to work together. The fact that these relationships exist and that we're discovering them is evidence to show that it is evolutionarily advantageous. It is evolutionarily advantageous to do this and to work together, to cooperate and share resources. And we have to cast doubt on that, because we can't let the people work together. We can't let the people realize what the plants know to be true, right? We have to keep the people in the dark. We have to make them doubt. Then we have to keep them all individually, individual people separated and, doing everything for themselves, because that's how you survive. Gotta look out for number one. No, well, you look out for everyone and everyone looks out for you, and all of a sudden they've got a very big problem on their hands. And who they is you can figure that out. But if everyone works together and we're all getting along, it is very hard to get rid of it, right? It makes it very difficult to do things that people don't like when we're all together and we're all in agreement. It's much easier to do stuff when there's all this discourse and everyone's broken up and separated, right? Because then you can do whatever you want and everyone's too busy arguing with each other to stop you. Look at the world.
It doesn't seem like a very good strategy, evolution-wise. Well, the authors weren't finished there. The final claim was that mature...
They're making it sound like they're like dunking absolute bombs on this paper. They weren't finished there. Like, that was literally the worst argument I've ever heard. You're not owning this paper. Like, I don't know what you're doing. It's words.
Broad trees were...
But it sounds scientific and credible. And that's the biggest problem here, right? They're posing as, we're just being good scientists. But no, they're actually being terrible scientists.
More likely to
This is the problem with the world.
Communicate and share with their own offspring through the network, which largely covers the...
This doesn't even need, like, whether or not this is true doesn't matter. Does not matter. It's not a part of the initial paper. this is irrelevant to the initial point they were trying to make. But they're going to slam dunk this on there like it's a big disproving. You know, whether or not the mother tree thing is real or not, I don't know. It could not be true. But it does seem likely that wherever this tree grows, the trees around it are going to do good because the conditions for this tree that has survived long enough to produce seeds they're going to have similar genetic code and therefore be basically built to survive in those immediate conditions. And therefore, they are going to be much more likely to survive where they got planted. Because if they get planted right below the tree that literally is growing there, obviously, yeah, they're going to do better because they literally they have a parent that grew there and thrived there long enough to produce seeds. And if they thrived there, that means that their offspring are likely going to thrive in that location because it's most likely suitable for them as well if it was suitable for their parent. You know, there doesn't need to be this increased resource sharing. However, it's likely that that would also form too, because if you have similar genetic code, there's probably also, on some level, an easier transaction, right? Because if you produce sugars in the exact same way, then it's going to be a lot easier to transfer and process these sugars from your parent. And obviously the parent tree is going to be producing way more sugars than the baby tree because it's got way more leaves and way more like resources at its availability. So obviously it's going to be sending the resources mostly one way. So like there's just so many reasons. Like I don't even need to do the research. The logic just tracks on this. All right. And it doesn't need to be true. Like it really does not need to be true, but I find it likely that it is. And it doesn't need to be oh, my baby's like, there doesn't need to be that. It just makes sense. It's just a logical thing that would happen.
The whole mother tree.
And again, survival of the fittest. You know, the seeds that did the best near where they get planted are going to be the ones that survive. And then over time, that continues to happen. So yeah, most seeds get planted directly below the tree or right around the immediate area where the tree that dropped them is, and therefore they're going to thrive there the most because that's what they've evolved to thrive in. Like that's just how evolution works. That's what they do. Like it's so stupid.
Idea. And this
So
one
stupid.
may be shocking because the authors actually found no published peer-reviewed evidence
No published peer-reviewed evidence
from forests at all to support this claim.
from forests. From forests. What about labs, though? Why did they have to put that there? What about labs, though?
In fact, a master's thesis from Simard's own lab actually found the opposite. As
Actually found the opposite.
Douglas firs placed in a shared fungal network were less likely to survive if they were close to their older genetic relative.
I really wanted to read this paper. So, area, volume, and stem length also suggest kin selection, although not consistently in all experiments. In the field, I'm reading the stuff that they didn't highlight, right? In the field, survivorship was greater among non-kin. However, detection of recognition may have been masked by large effects of site and seed origin on germination and survival. The networks and carbon transfer occurred. They're literally saying in this paper they proved, they proved that the carbon transfer occurred within all greenhouse seed pairs, and enhanced mycorrhization, which is just more fungal connections of kin, suggest network colonization was involved in selection. So they're saying literally right there that the mycorrhizal fungal connections were forming, right? Which is actually what the Wood Wide Web was all about. So they're proving in this paper, actually, that is supposed to be disproving it, that it is real and it is there and it does form, right? And then they're saying that there did seem to be an enhanced amount of connections between kin. So then they're now highlighting a selection bias, and they have already established that these connections are beneficial and provide additional sugars and therefore will benefit them more, right? So they say all this. This is all stuff that doesn't get highlighted and they don't bring up, because this is stuff that disproves the entire argument they've been making for the past 30 minutes about how it's wrong, right? It's not actually been 30 minutes yet, but we're only like halfway through the video. That really goes to show. Holy crap. And survival mycorrhizal networks and carbon transfer occurred within all the green, blah, 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 blah. Kin suggests network colonization was involved in selection, but our data does not strongly support our hypothesis that kin recognition was facilitated by mycorrhizal networks. I don't even know what to say about that. Our data does not strongly support our hypothesis that kin recognition was facilitated by mycorrhizal networks. Okay. So what they're highlighting this to make it seem like this is disproving anything. This is just words. Like, it doesn't mean anything. There's no conclusion here. They basically said, yeah, I mean, we still don't know. I mean, there does seem to be a lot of stuff, but we don't know how. I mean, there does seem to be some sort of kin selection, but we don't know how it functions. We couldn't figure out how it functions. Disproved! What?
Relatives in the field. Even more uncomfortable is that Simard made a narrative choice to write.
A narrative choice, making her seem like some crazy person, right? They're really framing her like this mad woman that's just like absolutely absurd for thinking that trees deserve more than to be resources. How crazy to see the beauty of this world and realize that we are a part of it and not here to destroy it, right? Like, how crazy to want to be working with the world rather than against it. What a crazy concept.
Write in her book that the grad student had found support for her theory, even though she...
This right here is just mudslinging slander. Does not matter for the Wood Wide Web. This is about her book. We're on her book now. We totally forgot about the Wood Wide Web because we actually proved that the Wood Wide Web works.
She has since denied that she was deliberately misleading her readers.
She has since denied that she was deliberately misleading her readers. Okay. What? I don't even know what that was about.
To top off their review, Cast and her colleagues looked to see whether there had been any bias in the literature surrounding the network. They identified 18 studies that had been influential in this field, and looked at how they were used in subsequent research. There can be a tendency for more positive or more interesting results to be cited. More than those that are neutral.
But what did the other one show then? There was 18 papers or whatever that were influential in this field. Well, what were they influential about? What did they say? What did they find? They don't talk about it, right? I don't think they mention it, right? But I feel like that's very important information. Like, what are they talking about? What did they find? If they're so influential in this field, what were their findings? right? But they're not gonna you're never gonna find that out, right? Like, what even were these 18 mysterious papers? You're never gonna know. There may only be one. Who cares? I mean, put numbers on the page. They're gonna throw sources in their paper, but who's actually gonna check?
Or disagree with the hypothesis, even if methodically the research was correct. It's called positive citation bias and can lead to misconceptions being spread. And
would hate to see that happen.
Exactly what the authors found in this case. Across nearly 1,700 papers citing the 18 original studies, around 25% of them were misinterpreting these studies as support for claims about...
Guess what? This video is literally misinterpreting information. So, what are you saying with this? That you're just as bad as the rest? Like, I don't know.
Network structure, and 50% of them for claims about network function. To give just one example of this bias, several of the 18 papers have reported...
Again, none of this is disproving the actual thing of connections. It is just saying that a lot of people don't understand it. It is not saying that it's not real. It's not saying it doesn't exist. It's just saying a lot of people misinterpreted and misunderstood the information. It's not saying the information was false. Just putting that out there because it's making it sound like we're proving it wrong. And that is not what is being said. That is not what's happening here. And this is totally irrelevant to the initial argument.
Reported evidence that networks could form.
Could form. Because no one knows for certain, no one can prove it, but there's a lot of evidence to show that it could form.
But many papers published later had cited these studies as evidence that networks were present in forests.
Again, I really want to argue, why would they not be present in forests? If they form in the lab, what is the actual difference between in the lab and in the field? Do you think that they just decided, hey guys, want to share resources because we're in the lab? Like, these behaviors came from somewhere. You think that they just realized that they're in a lab and that they can share resources all of a sudden? Like, no, like, this is so stupid. This is just the dumbest. This is just so dumb.
Research wording is everything, and evidence suggesting that networks can form is not the same as evidence that they do form in complex real-world habitats. But you can see how that kind of...
Complex real-world habitats. I'm getting really... I'm so mad. I'm so mad right now. Because it's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. This is what really ticks me off, because this seems like a credible source. I thought it was a credible source. But look how opinionated it is. Look how easily something that seems rigorous and academic is just propaganda slop. Because this entire video has failed to disprove the one thing that it said it was going to. All of this has just been slander and misinformation, basically. And now they're preaching about misinformation being a problem.
Positive bias is a bit of a runaway train.
Positive bias is a bit of a runaway train. Yeah, so is negative bias.
And if even published researchers are doing it, then it's bound to happen in the mainstream media.
Not going to mention any names, though.
Too. As you may expect, Simard wasn't too pleased when the Wood Wide Web began to unravel at her feet, calling Cast's review paper an injustice to the whole world, no less.
Indeed.
She labelled all the critics as...
Popped off with that statement because, yeah, what the hell? Reductionist scientists, yeah, because The only thing to be taken away from this is, oh, we can go back to harvesting trees like they're just a resource and we can not care about them as much. Okay, good. Trees aren't forming connections and relationships. They're just these dumb trees. They're so stupid. Like, let's just chop them all down. You know, like, who needs forests? You know?
As reductionist scientists, and has since published response articles pushing back on some of their arguments. Now, although we're often quick to take sides during a drama, it's important to note that there are no heroes and villains in this story.
Now they're going to make their argument that they've been objective this whole time. There's no heroes or villains in this story. Meanwhile, they definitely picked a side from the very beginning. So them saying this is total BS, right? But it's to make it seem like, oh, we were objective this whole time. They weren't. They were not.
Some scientists may disagree with Simard's stance, but others don't. And if nothing else, Simard has done good work for the forest too. Her 2015 Mother Tree project is a research initiative aimed to protect the biodiversity of British Columbia woodlands, drawing on indigenous knowledge and changing forestry practices in North America to be more sustainable. These are admirable goals which we can agree are probably good for conservation.
Probably good. Yeah. No. They're good. I think we can all agree these things are good. But this Wood Wide Web thing, that was not good. We had to get rid of that. That was bad.
Regardless of whether the person advocating for them believes in the Wood Wide Web or not.
What is this,
scientific arguments?
What is this, Santa Claus believes in the Wood Wide Web or not? Like, no! If you didn't disprove it, if the debate is still happening, it's because it's not disproven. There's no debate. You either have the evidence or you don't. They don't. They don't. There is a mountain of evidence for and very little against. So in my opinion, this is not a debate. This is just slander and misinformation to make people care less about trees.
The situation has become messy.
Good job being objective, though.
With researchers picking at details and scrabbling to express where they stand on the matter. Unfortunately, by the time the smoke clears on this debate...
Unfortunately... It was such a shame that after all the smoke clears on this debate, it'll be too late and no one's gonna care. That's just so unfortunate. And if only there was something that could have been done to prevent this. Yeah.
The public may have lost...
Again, you do not need to prove them wrong. You just need to prove... You don't need to prove anything. All you need to do is cast doubt. And if there's enough doubt, then everyone will not do anything until it's too late or they will not care. And that is exactly what's happening. And they're literally admitting that this is what's going to happen and what is happening. And this is why it makes me very upset. Because this is quite obviously propaganda. And they're making their propaganda seem like it's not propaganda while being propaganda. It's crazy. This is insanity.
Interest in the results. And scientists will definitely struggle to garner the same kind of enthusiasm that once buzzed around the Wood Wide Web.
The way that the words are getting exaggerated here is just really weird to me. Enthusiasm that buzzed. What are you doing? What are you doing?
But as Cass says, our job as scientists is to present the truth as close.
Our job as scientists is to present the truth as close as we can. Okay. Where's your evidence? It sounds to me like all you've done is harm the planet. You know, I really hope you can sleep. Because, damn, I don't think I could.
Close as we can get to it. Errors, misinterpretation, and even overexcitement are all traps that scientists and the
These
media
are
reporting their
traps.
findings can fall into. We are all human after all.
We are
So
all
we
human
need to always
after
be
all.
open to reflect objectively and update.
We need to reflect objectively. Great job on being objective. And update our presentation of truth. Good job of showing us the truth.
Our presentation of truth as we gain new insights. And one thing scientists can all agree on, these revelations about the Wood Wide Web should never be used to discount trees altogether.
Right. Never should be used to discount trees altogether, but discount them a little bit. You should discount them a little bit though, because they're not like us. Don't discount them altogether though. Just a little bit. Discount them just a little bit. Don't neglect conservation or discount them, just a little bit though.
Together, or neglect their conservation. Now, with all that disillusionment behind,
2 lines of text in the entire video to promote, to counter the entire video is talking about discounting trees and conservation. But they put those 2 lines of text in there so that they can say, no, that's not what we meant at all.
behind us, it's time
Now that all that delusionment, very objective there. Good job.
to move on to something more concrete, because we may be unsure about the extent of plant communication, but there is no doubt among scientists that plants do
So there's no doubt among scientists that plants do communicate. Then what is this? What even is this? What if the connections, if they communicate in any way, how could you possibly make such a strong argument about the Wood Wide Web not existing just to turn around and say, but they still talk to each other, guys? If they can communicate in any way, shape, or form, then what is your argument? What are you arguing against? Basically nothing. This is absurdity. This is insanity.
communicate. Moving from sink to source, plant leaves can be the trigger for vital messages. Volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, encompass a large group of molecules that tend to have a low molecular mass, so they can evaporate easily and travel through the soil or air. For several decades now, scientists have suspected that they play a role in tree communication, particularly when trees are exposed to stress. Because trees can't just run away from predators, they may have adapted to make use of VOCs as a warning signal in the event of an attack, giving them more time to prepare. A 2013 study cut the leaves of willow trees to mimic the damage caused by nibbling creatures. This caused them to release VOCs, and as a result, neighbouring trees were then more likely to be munched on instead. The same was found in another study, this time on alder trees. They saw the same effect, but, funnily enough, trees further from the damaged ones showed weaker resistance to herbivores, suggesting that if a signal was involved, there was a limit to how far it could travel through the forest.
Again, you don't need to communicate with every tree in the entire forest. If you send out a warning, then the immediate area receives it. You know, if I yelled right now, the entire world is not going to hear me, but someone probably will. Like, I don't understand what you're trying to say, right? Like, At this point, I'm just like tired. And I don't even know what the point of adding this on to this video was. Because it just does more to confuse what exactly you were trying to prove. What this video was even about.
So, we've discussed some of the evidence for VOCs being used in communication. But how did scientists piece this together into a theory of what was really going on? These studies were suggesting that when a tree is attacked by a herbivore and damaged in some way, its neighbours could pick up on this and prepare themselves for an attack. This is possible, as trees have a host of chemicals they can use in herbivore defence, like bitter-tasting tannins or toxic alkaloids, which have been shown to be effective tools in fending off pests. And scientists could be pretty sure that it was VOCs that were inducing these responses, since any efforts to block airborne signals by putting the tree branches in airtight bags meant that neighbouring trees took more damage from the herbivores. But hang on, because there's a danger here of entering into the same minefield as the Wood Wide Web drama. This behaviour seems too selfless to work with the principle of survival.
This behavior seems too selfless. So they disprove the Wood Wide Web, and now they try and cast doubt on this, even though there's tons of evidence that this is true. They start to cast doubt on this as well. This behavior seems too selfless, a very objective term, by the way. Seems is an extremely objective term. Too selfless to work with the principle of survival of the fittest. Again, this is so stupid. It makes sense to help your buddies out and warn them so that they can warn you. I already did this.
Survival of the fittest. Why would a tree bother to send a warning signal to its neighbours whilst it was being attacked by herbivores?
Why would it bother?
Wouldn't it be better for that tree if its neighbours did get damaged, since that might leave more light and other resources for itself? But consider this. What if the damaged tree wasn't intentionally sending out a warning to help its neighbours?
Yeah, what if it's just dumb? Imagine this. Trees are stupid. Chop them down. They're gonna warn their buddies. Yeah. No, they don't care about their friends. Just chop those trees down. They don't know what they're doing.
But the neighbours had evolved to make use of a warning that the damaged tree was releasing anyway. Scientists call this eavesdropping, and it explains these results in a way that agrees with widely accepted principles of natural selection. Any individual...
Again, it doesn't matter if the tree is intentionally trying to save all the trees around it. The fact that they do, in my opinion, is more important. Right? This tree does not need to be like, oh, I gotta help out all my bros. It does not need to do that. But it knows that doing that is surviving, is favorable. And this does not mean that they're dumb. This does not mean that they're dumb trees that aren't working together and communicating. That is communication. Right? If you are waving your hands at someone, telling them, no, don't come this way, right? You're waving your hands. Actually, I can think of a better example. If you're coughing and sneezing, or you have rashes on your body, right? You don't have to tell anyone that you're unwell. Everyone can just see that without you having to communicate that you're unwell, right? And so your body isn't necessarily doing that for its own benefit, right? But because that happens, we have adapted and we have realized, oh, you're sick. And because displaying sickness is beneficial for the collective, that trait has survived. And now all humans are it's pretty easy to tell when someone's sick. It's very visible. You can realize someone is sick, and it's not because that's survivor favorable for the person that's sick. It's survivorably favorable for everyone else around them, because they know, oh, they're sick, I should avoid them so I don't also get sick. Right? This is like, are we dumb? Are we dumb for doing that? Like, I don't understand the arguments.
Individual plant produces many VOCs when it's attacked by herbivores to signal to itself, coordinating a response between distant branches or leaves. It is...
I think that's stupid, but potentially a more, like, I don't know tree mechanics. Potentially it's faster to communicate that way. So yeah, it does do that. But I don't know, right? I don't know. But
this signal meant for communication within each individual plant that other plants can pick up on and use to prime their own responses. So trees have adapted to eavesdrop on their fellow trees in the forest. But perhaps more impressive is their ability to call for help during an attack from the most unlikely allies. Terpenes are a specific group within the VOCs and are responsible for that nice tree smell you get when you walk into a forest. These molecules are also used in tree communication in response to herbivores, environmental stress, and changes to the soil microbiome. In 2011, an experiment looked into how the European field elm responds to attacks from the elm leaf beetle with the help of terpenes. See, the elm leaf beetle likes to lay its eggs on the leaves of the tree, ready for the larvae to feast on them when they hatch. But the elm has some tricks up its sleeve to combat this. They release terpenes, which seem to attract another insect, the euphylid wasp, to eat the eggs. Like insect bodyguards, they can protect the elm from damage and get a nice egg feast as a reward. The 2011 study was designed to prove whether it was the terpenes that were signaling for wasp backup. So the authors allowed the beetles to do their thing and lay eggs on the elm, whilst treating half of the trees with chemicals that stopped them from being able to make terpenes. They then collected all the odours produced by the trees during this ordeal and presented them to the wasps to see what they'd do. As the team suspected, the wasps spent significantly more time in the test field when the tree odours included terpenes than when terpene production had been cut off. With these results, the authors concluded that it is the terpenes that attract the wasps, and that the trees are far more skilled at fending off beetle attacks than we may give them credit for. So, as it turns out, trees have some amazing ways of interacting with the world around them. Like any living thing on Earth, trees can sense changes to their surroundings and have employed suites of molecules that help them to respond, whether it's seeking out food, preventing attacks, or calling out for help. So yeah, trees are amazing, but just maybe not in the way we thought. And if
just not in the way we thought. And that's what's the most detrimental part of this, is thinking that trees are not worth protecting.
If nothing else, the pushback on the wood wide web should motivate us to understand trees better, as there are still so many fascinating answers to be found. I'll be honest, I originally expected to tell a more traditional story of the Wood Wide Web, exploring a forest of trees that are all for one and one for all, assisting each other with their intricate network of fungal friends. But thanks to this new research, That is definitely not how the story unfolded.
That is definitely not how the story unfolded. This new research that definitely disproves the... No, it didn't. I don't even know what this video did do. It kind of did a lot of nothing. Just makes me confused, which is the goal.
But I hope you'll agree that this is still a tale worth telling.
No.
Though they strive to be, scientists are not always right.
Right.
Ideas can and should be questioned, details revised, and corrections made as their research unfolds.
Yep.
Science is built on debate and continuous pursuit of knowledge and truth, no matter how long it takes to find what that truth is. Sadly, the Wood Wide Web may be one of... Sadly, the Wood Wide Web may be one of those cases where our heads were turned before the real truth came out. No, that's the sad part right there. Because all that this serves to do, all that disproving this serves to do, is the only thing that comes from this is people caring less about trees and being less concerned with the environment in general. There wasn't any real downsides to believing this to be true, whether or not it is or not. But arguably, I don't think they found any evidence that it's not real. So they just kind of did a lot of nothing and said, well, we're still not totally sure, but we don't really think it might... One of those cases where our heads were turned before the real truth came out. I hope this video can go some of the way towards setting the record straight and show that
yeah, way to go. You really set the record
isn't
straight.
Always as infallible as it may.
Yeah, no, you pissed me the hell off. I'm ending it there.